Welcome to the Gen Z Show. I'm your host, James McLamb, and this is the fourth in a series of podcasts that we've been doing on social media. And this one is completely different. This episode, we're going to bring in five former graduates of our Zigger Youth Certification Program that have come through our program at different stages over the past 5 years. And they have different aspects that they're going to bring to and different viewpoints they're going to bring to social media. So we're just going to have a roundtable discussion where we're going to talk about some of the issues of social media, some of their experiences with social media, and maybe come up with some solutions or maybe some suggestions. This is really for you to hear it from the end user about how social media is affecting their lives, how they perceive it affecting their peers' lives, and what they would like to see as a solution. So let's bring in our friends right now. So let's go ahead and start and introduce yourself. Tell us your name and what state you're from.
Hey, I'm Sara Beth McLamb, and I'm from North Carolina.
I'm Abby Durheim, and I live in Nebraska.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gunnar Griggs-Bell, and I'm from Texas.
Hey, everybody. My name is Sara Thomas, and I'm from North Carolina.
Hey, guys. My name is Lafe, and I'm from Minnesota.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for all being here. You're from all over the country, and this is going to be fun. And I really appreciate you guys being willing to do this. So one of the things that I thought we would start off with is I just want to ask you to give a personal standpoint of what is your personal experiences with social media, because you guys are all part of Generation Z. You're all a part of Generation Z, the generation that really has grown up not knowing a time when there was not some kind of social media platform. Do you guys remember what the very first social media platform that was widespread use was? Anybody? MySpace, right. And it got run out of business by who? Facebook. Well, I guess MySpace is still out there, but, Facebook really took over. And we're talking about the early part of this century, 15, 20 years ago in that frame point. So you guys are not going to remember a time with it. So I want to hear from you guys. Somebody speak up and tell me what your personal experience is with social media and how you view it.
I can go first. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Gunnar.
I have grown up always having social media. My parents always had it when I was younger. And so moving into middle school, when I got my first phone, I wasn't allowed to have social media until probably about the 7th or 8th grade. And that was when I had Instagram and I had Snapchat. And so ever since middle school, I've had it throughout high school. And it's evolved and gotten bigger, and it's almost become a way of life in a sense. And I've been put in various positions. Right now I'm a Texas FFA state officer. And so we use social media for all kinds of things throughout our service and making sure we're sending out advertisements and different posts on all kinds of platforms through social media. And so I'm very involved with social media, and it's something that I use daily.
Cool. I just wanted to chime in a little bit because since I'm like the oldest of the group, and I have an older brother.
Second oldest, I want to point out. Second oldest.
That's a good point. But I kind of have like a weird, different experience growing up with social media because my brother is 8 years older than I am. And so like I remember growing up and seeing his MySpace, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then it kind of came time for my age group to have a MySpace, but it was already a downfall by then. But it's also kind of weird because the first internet that we had at my house was actually still dial-up internet because, rural broadband. And, as time progressed on, I've seen apps go through the highs and lows. Like I had Vine when it was cool. Snapchat was very different for sure. And now we're on TikTok and stuff. And honestly, some of the stuff that's on TikTok, I'm like, wow, I'm glad I didn't see that kind of stuff when I was 15. So I think I've been kind of lucky to see it shift over time.
Yeah. Well, Gunnar, I'll say my 7th grade self is very jealous of you because that's when Instagram became like pretty popular, was in 7th grade. And I wanted one so bad because all my friends had phones and I didn't. And I was like, man, they're so cool. They get to post pictures and the selfies with the duck face and the peace sign. And I was like, I wish that was me. And they used to talk about vines and all that. And I wanted it so bad. But I got social media in the ninth grade when I got my first phone. And I've been on it ever since ninth grade. I went through, I don't know if y'all ever experienced the cleanses where everyone would just like delete it all and then add it back secretively and be like, I'm going off of social media, I'm done, and then add it back and then they're back on. So I've had it pretty consistently. I'd say I did like 2-day cleanses here and there since the ninth grade. But I mean, I'm on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. I have TikTok now, so that's super fun. I got tired of hearing all my students talking about TikToks and me not knowing what it was because they seemed funny. But yeah.
Well, Sarah Beth, similar to you, I've been on a cleanse and I'm still on it as of a year or so. Similar to you, Sarah, Thomas, I grew up knowing about the social medias as they came out. I remember when Snapchat first came out. I remember when Instagram came out. And unlike Sarah Beth, I had free access. I lied about my age. I think it said, check you if you're 13. And little 11-year-old Lafe was like, heck yeah, I'm 13. And it was an interesting time learning about these social medias because I didn't ask my parents if I could be part of it. I just kind of did it because in my mind, it was just another app. How is that any different than Flappy Birds where you click the app and the bird goes up and down? And so for me, it was very interesting to grow up in that time, not really having that supervisor, that person who cared about my experience on this and cared about how he's doing it. It was interesting to see as I grew up and got more involved with different groups, how I had to utilize that. And I slowly realized like, wow, this is not something I want to be a part of. And which is why I'm currently on my 1-year cleanse and going on strong. Now I do got to say, I still have a Facebook, but the only reason why I have a Facebook is because my grandma checks in on me on Facebook. So can't get
Ladies, some days I wish that I was on a cleanse from social media. I feel like it, as we'll talk about throughout this conversation, social media kind of consumes a big portion of my life. So not only do I have like my personal social media accounts, where like Sarah Beth, it was very monitored, and I remember having to like put my phone up at night because my parents would be like, Abby, you'll spend all night scrolling. And little do they know that 23-year-old Abby will definitely scroll TikTok for a very long time. But that whole kind of debacle of how do you manage personal social media. But now, as I am getting a master's and have degrees in communications, social media is my job. I manage our departmental social media. I have a photography business where my main source of advertisement is social media and portraying the images that I'm taking. And so I spend a lot of time on social media, but I also have learned in a recent conversation with the National 4-H Council Young Alumni Advisory Council that, in which I am the oldest member, all of these other Gen Zers are talking about these new forms of social media that I don't even know exist, like Be Real and Twitch maybe, or I don't even know. Like they started talking and I felt incredibly old. So now I feel like now that it's juxtaposed where I thought I was in the in, but now I'm like on the out. So I don't know. Social media I have a love-hate relationship with it. And I feel like I always will.
I think that's probably true of everybody. I like the way that it ended, that you have a love-hate relationship with it, and people know about the positives and negatives. Listen to this stat here that I'm going to share with you guys. A plurality of teens, this was a recent survey, 45% think that social media does not impact them positively or negatively. So 45% of the teenagers that were surveyed said, it doesn't affect me either way. And around 31% of those that were interviewed or surveyed says that they see social media as a positive influence. So let's add those numbers together. We got 76% of teenagers that are saying social media either is not a positive impact or a negative impact, or it is good for me. It doesn't affect me at all, or it's good for me. What do you guys think about that? I mean, let's what do you think is What do you think about that? What do you guys think about that? Is that true? Are people being blind? What's going on here?
That scares me, James. That statistic actually scares me. Not necessarily even the amount of people that say it has a positive impact, but the amount of people that say it has no impact on you. How many, from a sheer like numbers and business perspective, how many businesses or cities or tourist destinations or whatever have things that are literally dedicated just for it to look Instagrammable? And the fact that Instagrammable is even a word, like, from that right there, society as a whole has been so incredibly impacted by social media, because it's all about making your highlight reel of life look great. And while we have, I think, come off of that, at least to a degree, knowing that the world around us isn't just a highlight reel and that it's more than just social media, we still as individuals are striving to make sure that our pictures look great, that our grids are cohesive, that we're doing, like, people have bachelorette parties now that literally are 100% dedicated to taking Instagram pictures because they just want to look cool and it's how they fit in. But those opportunities are 100% revolving around social media.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask Gunnar, since he's actually traveling and doing a lot of work this year with you, do you see social media being a positive or a negative influence with the youth that you are encountering with now? And then you guys can chime in as well. Gunnar, do you see it as a positive or a negative influence with the youth that you're encountering this year?
I see it as a negative. I definitely concur with Abby's statement.
Oh, we lost him. Somebody else jump in while we're talking, while we're waiting for him.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, the only way I can think that's justifiable, going off of what you were saying, Abby, is if they're saying, well, a bad plus a good equals nothing. That was really all I could think about. And Gunnar, do you want to finish your answer, or?
You go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry. We lost you for a second there. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's kind of crazy that people aren't seeing an effect on their life personally. I mean, there's a whole trend going around where people like take off filters and they're showing like, this is what I look like with a filter on, this is what I look like without one. And I mean, personally, I don't like my picture being taken unless it's going to be an Instagrammable worthy picture, just in case it gets posted anywhere. Even if it's not even my own personal account, I'm like, I don't want my picture taken, because if someone else posts this and they tag me in it, and this is embarrassing, but I have genuinely untagged myself from certain pictures because I don't like it and I don't think I look good in the picture, even though that's probably how I look 90% of the time. I untag myself from it. I don't want it showing up on my feed. And so for people, and I've seen I struggle with that. I don't think I'm super addicted to social media, but for students, there's so much drama that goes on because of social media that I'm like, this affects you one way or another. And classroom students come in all the time. Well, they said this about me here. They liked this picture. They weren't supposed to. That's my boyfriend, whatever. But that's crazy to me that 70 something percent of people say it's good or has zero effect. I agree with Abby. That's kind of crazy that they would even say that.
Yeah, so I'm sorry for the technical difficulty, but I was saying how I agree with Abby and now Sara Beth's statement. There's a lot of positive on social media, but there's also a lot of negative. And growing up through middle school, always using it in high school and using it in different ways, you have this persona that you should be able to fit into this category, or you need to look like this, or your Instagram feed needs to be this, or you need to make TikToks that look like this, so you'll go viral. And I think that that's had a negative impact on a lot of society and Gen Z, and especially myself. Like Sara Beth said, I am not going to post an Instagram picture if I do not look good in it, and I don't want someone taking a picture of me if I'm like in the background like slouching down, or it's just not a pretty picture. And so I definitely think it's had that impact of everything needs to look clean and polished and presentable for anyone that's viewing my social media.
I would say
yeah, go ahead, Sara.
Well, something that came to mind while y'all were speaking is, I think probably the most, those that said that there is either positive or no effect might have been fibbing a little bit, in my opinion. But and I think honestly, the worst part of like the negative impact that it has is that it has kind of made us lose a bit of our humanity over time, because how easy is it to just unfollow or block somebody and remove them that way, whereas obviously you can't do that in person unless you're watching Black Mirror or something. And that's what I hate the most about it, is just it just comes off so like with so much brunt force, I guess, and I hope we get away from that.
Well, and just looking at the statistic where it says, I think it was 76% said it's positive or no effect at all. When I first got social media, or even a few years ago when I was on it, I think I probably would have fallen into that category where I said, hey, this is a positive thing. And it's not because I was like deceiving myself or anything. I think it's because when you're using it, you feel like this sense of like you're included. You have this sense of like I'm staying connected. And so I think it does give those feelings, but when you start to come down to like what it actually is doing inside of yourself, when it comes down to like emotionally and physically and spiritually, some of the things it does, I think you start to see a little more. So I don't think like that statistic is off. I think people truly believe that, but I think it's a lot because we don't necessarily understand what's all going on, especially when we're talking about teenagers. And that means you're going down from 13 to 19, like that age group. I mean, at age 13, I could barely tie my shoes, let alone know what social media was doing. So when we talk about this, I think it's just also we're introducing such a strong and such a very powerful tool at such a young age without instructions. I mean, it says read the terms and conditions, but no one does that. Everyone clicks, yes, I'm 13. Yes, I've read terms and conditions. Okay, here's how you post. Here's how you read. Here's how you like. Go ahead, have fun. And I think just seeing that is a very scary situation. And I also got to say that I'm probably the most negative social media person here. I probably am the person who dislikes it the most. But I know there's a lot of good too. So I want to clarify with that is that although it's a scary tool, it's also a very powerful tool that can be used for good.
Well, I'm glad you said it kind of bridges to this. I was going to read some of the things that teens believe social media is positive for. So you set it up well. Like, here's some of them. See you, and I want your guys' reaction to it. It helps them communicate with friends and family. It allows them to meet new people. That could be good or bad. It can connect them with people that have the same interest. It allows them to express their emotions and share unique experiences. They can find and get support from communities with similar experiences. Helps them feel less lonely. Gives them greater access to information and news. Helps them learn new things. Helps them more comfortable asking for help. And it's entertaining. Those are just some of the things they feel are positive. Few of you guys react to that. Tell me what you think about that.
Well, if you guys don't mind, I'll start right away. I think, the positive here, it talks about family. I'm currently living with some family, and my aunt, she says she just loves Snapchat because she gets a picture of her son when he's at college. And that just means he's alive. Okay, that's all she cares. Hey, he's alive. We won't talk, but he's alive. And we like that. But when we talk about connections, I think this gets a little more rougher because what are we really connecting with? And so when we start to talk about like, okay, can you use social media to connect with people? For sure. But you're also on a phone that calls people. So why didn't you just call them? Why didn't you talk to them? Heck, even FaceTime. I love FaceTime. It's basically this right here. I get to see your face. We get to interact. We get to hear each other's voice. But when you have, I met this student in Minnesota a couple of years ago, and his screen time on his phone was 19 and a half hours a day.
Wow.
And 18 of those was Snapchat. And I've watched him. He'd open a Snapchat. It'd be blank. He'd take a snap of himself doing just like this. And then he'd hit send. And he'd go down the list and he just kept doing it. He had like over 200 streaks. And that was all he did. And he said it was the greatest thing ever. And I go, dude, you aren't even sleeping. Like, how is this?
Why do you think he said it was the greatest thing ever? Why?
Well, and when we talk about this, you later said the word lonely. It makes people feel less lonely. And I was thinking about that because I use that as a crutch myself. When I was in my freshman year, I felt very lonely and I'd go on social media because it made me feel connected. But what it really did after a while, it just made me feel more lonely because I was sitting there just seeing other people doing things with other people, or I'd see people looking their best, and I was just sitting in my own bed, and it made me feel so lonely. And it wasn't until I put the phone down and actually talked to people that I got that experience of not being lonely anymore. But I think it does, as I talked about earlier, it gives you these feelings of being connected, and it gives you these feelings of not being lonely. I'm pretty sure half the words you said I used earlier to describe how it made me feel at times. But when you really set down, like, okay, these may give me these feelings, but they're not true feelings, because what I'm looking for is true personal connection. And I don't think that's how social media works. I don't think you truly get a true spiritual and true personal connection with others through social media.
In that same light, talking about personal connection and being lonely, James, when you said something about like them being able to share their experiences and their emotions, that triggering is not the word I want to use, but it's lit something up immediately.
Well,
because
did you see my face when I read that?
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. I mean, terrible, again, might not be the right word, but we're teaching kids that the place to go find help, support, whatever, is online, in which we're really just exposing kids to be exploited. Now, well, they might not be physically exploited or like hurt or something like that, but we talk about politics with mean tweets, we talk about people trolling people, and we talk about all these things, but then we're also encouraging kids specifically to say, be your true authentic self, talk about your struggles, do whatever. But we also have this idea that social media needs to be a polished image. So we have this juxtaposition, and now our kids have no idea what they're actually supposed to do. Are they supposed to be their genuine, authentic selves and share their vulnerabilities? But do we also want them to share their vulnerabilities with the whole world? Like, what happens when 13-year-old Abby says, oh my gosh, I just am so mad at my best friend and blah, 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 and she's terrible. And 13-year-olds fight and make up, but now my future employer when I'm 30 is going to see that. And so, I mean, you just have this whole dynamic, but we're encouraging it. But also, like, there is a time and there is a place to talk about emotions on social media, and it can provide people with support because they might not be aware of the issue or whatnot. But is that the place that we truly want them to be sharing that story?
Yeah.
James, I just gotta say, I'm challenging you for the next podcast to pick 5 people who are in support of social media, because you picked.
Well, I think we got a mix of it. So
yeah,
one more on this side on the positive before we start talking about the negative.
I was gonna say real quick, some positives though. One thing, connection and like communication. I will say I do enjoy it because Abby and I haven't seen each other in person since 2018, but we talk or we Snapchat and we like Instagram, whatever, Facebook every single day. So that has been really nice because I feel like I haven't really skipped a beat with her life or like me, and like there's some things we've missed, but like we've been able to keep in touch for how many years? 4 years?
Yeah, for a long time.
Like, yeah, still keep our friendship, and like there's been some good coming out of it in terms of people sharing their thoughts on certain issues, where there's been different like trends, I guess, going around where people are speaking up about vulnerabilities. And I know for one, mental health was something that was never really talked about, but because of people sharing it on social media, I know that's a lot more talked about, which is really great because a lot of kids struggle with it and they don't know that it's okay to struggle with it. A lot of times, it was toughen up, you're okay, you're gonna be totally fine, instead of, hey, like, it's okay to talk about it. People go through things, let's talk about it, let's find some ways to help you. So I think that's been really cool, and to see students be able to have an outlet in a controlled way. Not always do they express their things controlled and nicely in a polished way, but it's been nice to be able to see them do things with other people, like on social media, like support different movements or share their own experiences in a vulnerable way. I'm not saying everyone is super authentic and vulnerable and real on social media, but it's been nice to see some students and some other people get genuine approval for the way they're feeling, or find ways to help mentally, or be able to connect with friends who are really far away on the other side of the country. So I would say those are some definite positive things that I agreed with from that list. But I do also agree with Abby and Lafe on a couple of those points.
Well, here's some of the
my
negative
opinion-
things. Go ahead, Sarah Thomas.
Real quick, I would just like to say in agriculture, I think we all have a connection there, obviously. And I think sometimes we are on the fence a lot of times, but like I'm pretty involved in the dairy industry, and I think it's been pretty good for us because we have these like a Facebook group for women in the dairy industry or like for Holstein breeders, different sorts of groups to collaborate. And for like dairy farmers that hardly ever get off the farm, I think it's been pretty good for them to have that sort of outlet. And there's been, Sarah, Beth, you mentioned mental health. Like there's been some of those initiatives taken in agriculture and even dairy specifically about like Jess Peters from Pennsylvania. She had this thing a while back where she like you could basically like submit a secret anonymously, and she could share those anonymously, of course. And it just kind of put into light, like we're real people with real struggles, but here it is on social media, and kind of brought that. I was talking about humanity earlier, kind of brought a little bit back there online, which I really liked.
So what I'm hearing is that the positives are really for what the creators of social media that originally said that they were building. That they were building places for people to connect, for people to share like ideas, for people to find those things and like ideas. However, as we know, it has more become an opportunity for to get people's attention so they can sell it. Because even though these social media apps are free, if you're not paying for a product, then you are the product. So you need to understand that if you are signing up for something that's free, then you are the product that is being sold to someone else. You're being sold to advertisers. So here's some of the negative things, and let's get some feedback on this. Reasons teens mention for seeing social media is negative. It's easier to spread hate to a larger audience. Anonymity makes people more comfortable with being cruel. People hurt each other because of what they see on social media. It gives false pictures of people's lives. It causes people to neglect real life relationships. I think that's very big, especially coming out of the last 2 years. It distracts people from important tasks like homework, schoolwork. It causes them to succumb to peer pressure and can lead to psychological issues or drama. Feedback on that. Gunnar, you wanted to jump off on that one since I think you were the only one to talk about the last one.
Yeah, so I can definitely agree with all of those negatives. However, one thing that I did not hear on the negative that I heard on the positive was that people are finding resources and are learning from social media. And being involved in the agriculture industry, I find that very scary in some scenarios. And while it is positive content on social media about things that you can learn and different resources for different things, but there's a lot of information on social media that is very untrue and unfactual. And I remember just a few short weeks ago, I was at a school facilitating, and we were just talking after class, and I went up to this young man and we were just talking about TikTok and stuff. And he was telling me how chocolate milk comes from brown cows, and he had learned this on TikTok. And
is that true,
I was
Sarah Thomas? No, it's not. Okay.
I'm waiting for it to happen.
So I was very shocked, and he had told me that he learned this on TikTok. And so it was an opportunity for me to advocate for agriculture, but also tell him that how that chocolate milk does not come from brown cows. And this was like, I've never come into an interaction where I've talked to someone where they believe something that they've seen, such as that. And it's not just agriculture, it's politics, it's facts about different things in our world. And so I think that that's negative that wasn't on that list that I feel like should be, is that people are getting a lot of their information and misconceptions from social media.
I agree. That's great. That's great input. Anyone else on the negatives?
I was going to say, I think we need to bring back the statement, you can't believe everything you see on the internet, but where do you go to look up anything? The internet. But yeah, I had two personal stories that actually related to two of those points. One, I was substituting in a middle school I guess it was a month ago or so. the administrator came in the middle of the class. I was super confused why administration was coming into all the classes I was substituting for. I was like, am I really doing that bad a job? What? But they had, in the 7th grade, they had at least one. They had 1 to 2 fights every single day for 2 weeks because of stuff that happened on social media at home. Like the kids were coming in from like home, conversations they had, things that were posted on different social media outlets, and they were physically fighting about what like had gone on social media. And so they had to come in and, you know, handle that. But I thought that was crazy. That's what, 2 weeks, 1 to 2 fights a day. That's 28 fights that could have been prevented had social media like not been used for harassment, bullying, you know, sharing things that aren't true about people, rumors, all that. And then the other one, I have 2 friends who actually they got into a personal fight relationship wise. In person, they were both super mad at each other. They were so mad, but they still had a Snapchat streak and they still liked each other's Instagram pictures. And so they were both mad, but they never talked about it because that was still going on. And the first time 7 to 8 months later that they even said that they were mad at each other was because the Snapchat streak was broken. That was what started the conversation. Yeah. 7 to 8 months later, they were like, why did you break the Snapchat streak? I feel like you've changed, da 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 da. And it stemmed back all the way to like October was when the issue started. And they faked it. They thought everything was okay because they still like each other's Instagrams. They still had a Snapchat streak. So those negatives, I mean, they're real, like real life stuff.
I'd like to add to one of those other negatives we might have missed. It's just gender. And again, like I think we talk about it affecting women more so than men, even though that definitely does happen.
Well, I mean, Sarah, to your point, just to affirm what you're saying,
yeah,
Facebook last fall in their study about how Instagram admittedly showed data that said it was negatively affecting young girls more than it was affecting young men.
Oh, okay, good to know. Not good, but you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, it's hard. Like you get on, I mean, you're in college, you get on and you see really pretty girls. They look perfect in a bathing suit. They're on a beach somewhere. And if you're like me, you're back in your college town and you're working so you can feed your cats and that sort of thing. It's really hard not to compare. And yes, comparison is the thief of joy, but it's very hard to remember.
Yeah. That and people getting engaged. I don't know. I guess I don't know. Maybe if I just hit this age where everyone's getting engaged, and there are people legitimately mad because they've seen their whole Instagram, Facebook feed is full of people getting engaged, and they're considering like breaking up with people because they're like, "I'm not engaged. This sucks. My whole life sucks." And it's like, oh, okay. But
listen to what a recent guest, the guest that we had, Chris Martin, who is the author of the book Terms of Service, said that how social media shapes us. One of the things he said is social media causes us to believe that attention assigns value, that the more attention that you get on social media, the value. What do you guys think about that?
I think that encompasses a very large mentality of all of our society. And in the last conversation we just had, like, I think you can boil that and this statement all down to like perceived self-image. And I know we talk about it and like have a curriculum on it in ZYC, but I see it more and more. I did a project my junior and senior year of undergrad about how photography impacts self-image and what I can do as a photographer to make people feel valued in front of the camera so that they're more comfortable and whatever. And what it turned out to be was a very deep self-reflection on self-image and how social media has impacted self-image. Like you said, Sarah, like comparison is the thief of joy, but it is so easy to compare when not only are they sitting side by side, but that you're sitting in front of it. And people are so engulfed in what they physically look like, what their life looks like. Are they polished? What's going on with me? But not only what's going on with me, but how do people perceive what is going on with me? And that's so much more important than what's actually going on with me. And so I just think that social media as a whole has kind of perpetuated that. And as we continue on, I think that it's impacting. I spend a lot of time looking at the Meta case with Facebook or Facebook Meta and the teenage girls and how it's impacting them, and because it's changing how we teach in school, how people parent their kids, how we interact as a society. I mean, I remember what I was like at 13. At least I like to think I remember what I was like at 13. That was a decade ago. And I looked like a kid. At least I was wearing mismatched clothes or business professional because I had no in between. And I was showing sheep, and I begged my parents. I wrote a business proposal to my parents to try to get an iPhone, and it did not work. And I know that I am far from a normal child, but I also
that's not normal. I'm just gonna tell you there. That's not.
Yeah, no.
But it's cool. I will say it's cool.
I really tried. But I look at my 14-year-old little sister now, and I'm just like she's not on social media, but to see that she's living like I lived a decade ago, and she almost seems as if she's out of it, because so many other people have told her, this is how society is. This is what you have to do. You have to be doing X, Y, and Z to be considered popular. This is how we determine friends and all these other things. And while she is highly successful, she's literally one of the most intelligent humans I've ever met, and she has very authentic relationships, she is not deemed popular in any stretch of the means. And she, on the surface, from the outside looking in, would not be someone that you're like, oh yeah, she knows what's up. And I can promise you that girl knows what's up. But it's just such a change in societal values and how you are perceived in self-image, and how terrible people's self-image truly is in today's day and age.
Yeah.
So
go
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I just wanted to hit on what Abby and Sarah talked about. We talk a lot about the focus on the female gender and how this social media has affected them. And I think that's something that we've been doing a really good job of highlighting, and I think needs to continue. But I also want to bring to light something that we don't really talk about, is how it affects the male gender. And so as a guy, I understand how guys work and the temptations that come from that. And so when you go onto social media, when you go on Instagram and there's I'll just be very blunt, when there's body parts that are hanging out that should not be hanging out, that is such a bad thing going on. And it just leads the young men into the wrong things. And so at the age of 13, you start looking at these things, seeing things. It's just not what should be happening. It's not something that should be going on. I don't know, when there was a nudist at the county fair when I was 13, my mom was like, other way, let's go, Lafe, other way. And now we just freely put that out there on social media. And we just allow.
What kind of fairs do y'all have up in Minnesota? I just want to
actually no. After that comment,
just want to ask that question. What is going on in the Great White North up there?
Yeah, I just think
y'all some weird people up there.
There's definitely, but that's everywhere. And honestly, today now it is everywhere. We just openly let this go out, and we let our kids of age 13, which 10 years ago, even 7 years ago, this stuff would have never flown. But today, because it is today, it does fly. And so we just openly let our youth into it and see it. And I just think it's really bad. And we talk about these relationships. And I think a lot of youth are trying to use these relationships online to soothe an aching relationship that they want with their creator, with Jesus, with their family. Those are the people who want it. Jesus wants a relationship with you. Your family wants a relationship with you. Your friends want these relationships with you. And you want them back, right? And we want them back, and you just may not realize it. So you try to go on social media to try to soothe that. I think those are two of the biggest issues that we don't hit on. And I don't want to diminish. I think female mental health is something we need to continue to focus on, but I think there's so much that we need to be focusing on when it comes to social media, not just, okay, let's see what the next most popular thing is. What are we going to give the most attention to? Because let's be real, people, it's the things we give the most attention to on social media aren't the positive things. It's always the negative.
Well, let's shift our focus in this conversation to what are some solutions, or what are some practical ways that we can implement some positive things to make it positive? And the way I want to do this is I want to share with you what some of our previous guests from over the last 3 weeks have said. Theo Davis, who is a digital and youth pastor of the church in St. Louis, talked about some principles for establishing guidance when youth are working with social media. And one of the things that he did is be a good human when you're on social media. Understand that who you follow, you're going to imitate. And then pick what you're going to be about and be intentional about it. Be intentional about it. That is a different concept that I think most people are even thinking about. There is a organization where I read one of their comments about social media, and they talk about how the fact that we would never give the keys to a car to a teenager without first teaching them how to drive. Yet we do give them a smartphone and access to social media without teaching them how to use it. So based on those principles that Theo Davis said, be a good human, make sure you understand that you're going to who you follow, you're going to imitate, and be intentional. What do you guys think about that? What are your thoughts about that? And then I'll go over to the other two guests as well, because it's some really good stuff. So
I think the word intentional resonates with me a lot when we're talking about, like, I go back to my sister. If I'm going to hand her social media, I know good and well that my parents are going to sit down and teach her about social media, what their expectations are, how social media can impact your life, the severity and intensity of social media, and that it's forever. And so and I know that is probably not the norm in most households. I know 9-year-olds that have social media and they just post random things. And I also think that even though we have an opportunity potentially to teach kids about how to use social media, how to be safe, how to be effective with it, and to use those guidelines of being a good human and pick what you're about and who you follow, you're going to imitate. Our parents' generation does not do a great job of following those rules. And at the end of the day, we can preach and preach and preach and tell these kids, this is how you need to use social media, and teach them the ways of the world. But if we're not setting a good example ourselves, you learn a heck of a lot more by doing and by seeing and being immersed into it than you ever do from a piece of paper. And I think that we can all kind of agree with that. And so if our parents are the ones that are random posting, not being intentional about who they are, who they follow, or, giving the snide comment, or, doing all of these little things that, in the grand scheme of life, not a big deal, annoying, but not a big deal. We're not teaching our kids or the Gen Z generation how to be an effective, intentional human on social media.
Yeah. I mean, and Sara touched on a little bit earlier. The one that resonated with me was being a good human on it. And she touched on the fact that we've lost a lot of the sense of humanity and being a real person because of the filters, because of the highlight reels of your life. And I was talking, sorry, there's a fly in here. I was talking with a teacher actually today, and she teaches at a private school in Raleigh. And what she was telling me is that the students that come into the school are so blinded by everything that they see on social media that they don't know how to interact with others. And, recent world events have not helped with that at all, because social media was the one and only way to communicate with people, because they were stuck in their houses. They don't know how to talk. They don't know how to learn. They don't know how to interact with others. And so something that they really focus on is social emotional learning, which is something that I think we all need to be more cognizant of, is not only living out, being authentic in real life, being intentional, being a good human, but also teaching others, hey, this is how we interact with people. This is how we're responsible. This is how we genuinely care about other people's emotions, not their likes and their comments. Because I feel like a lot of that has been lost. And so as a teacher, that's something I took to heart today in our conversation is how am I going to prepare my students to interact with each other? How am I going to prepare them with this social emotional learning tool so that they can be successful in life? Because as things come and go, and I like to think social media, like it was on the rise and then it fell for a little bit with the cleanses and like it's starting to fall again in certain areas, but then next day there's something else that's viral, so it's going in waves. So when it goes again, I mean, how are people going to communicate? And so something that I'm going to be doing is having students put their phones in a little cutout thing at the front of the classroom. I've seen so many or teachers do it at the school I'm going to be working at, where they have their phones put up in the front. So there's none of that. There's no distractions. You cannot go get it for any sort of reason. I mean, if there's an emergency, I mean, there are obviously some exceptions, but they put them out there so the students have to talk to each other. They can't be on their phone. And if it's not there, they lose points for the day. They lose certain amounts on test grades because they need to be real in life and learn how to interact with others. So that's something I think, would help.
I like that. And Sarah Beth made me think of something that one of my college professors at Virginia Tech would always tell us, like you're paying to be here. You're paying, and I was paying out of state tuition. Thank God for scholarships. But anyway, he told me one thing one day, and I always remember it was that there was a study that showed that you check your phone, it takes your brain 30 minutes to get back that kind of focus you had before you checked your phone.
Wow, really?
Apparently.
Wow.
And I mean, I believe it because.
Sorry, what did you say? I was looking at my phone. What did you say?
You're lucky I get you. And you were talking about intentionality earlier, and one of those physical ways we can do that is there are ways you can set time limits on your phone, and that's something I've had to do. Otherwise, I'll sit there and it'll be 4:00 in the morning, and here you are on TikTok. And something else that I just really has bugged me is that we are forgetting that these influencers on TikTok don't really do much of anything. They got famous probably because their parents had a lot of money and gave them a team and all that good stuff. And I think it sets a not so great example for young people because they kind of give them that thought. They're like, oh, well, hey, I can do the same thing. And yeah, maybe like 1 in a million, sure. But there's more to life. And I think we lose touch of that sometimes.
So what does it mean by intentionality? Here's what I think it means is that if you're going to go on an app, have a purpose for being on that app. Have a goal for what you're going with that app. I'm intentionally deciding to go on TikTok because I want to see these type of things, or I want to share these type of things. What I think it's trying to prevent is people just going onto an app because it's the vogue thing to do, it's the end thing to do, and then getting lost in that world. All right, let me go to the second guy. Second guy discussed, he actually had a different approach. He did something like Lafe, except for he even went more severe, where Lafe, has kind of gotten off of it for a year. This guy has limited everything for like the past 3 years. He just went off of everything. He only keeps a LinkedIn page just because he is a writer and a blogger, and that is how he gets people to sign up for his newsletter. Is there and for the connection. And if you know anything about LinkedIn, it's more professional driven than some of the others anyway. With it, so he completely got off of it. And he knows that's not for everybody, but he was encouraging too that we look at it that we need some accountability if we're going to be on social media, whether that's accountability to adults or parents or peers, or if it's accountability to a value standard or an ideal that you say, I am not going, this is the line for me. Because otherwise, if we're going on there and we don't have that line, we're going to get lost. What do you guys, somebody hasn't spoken on the last topic. What do you guys think about that?
Well, James, I'll say that the only reason why I haven't been on a 3-year cleanse is because 3 years hasn't happened. So we're coming for him. I'll beat him these days once I can delete Facebook, but that won't be for a while. But I think a lot of this, you talk about accountability. I think a lot of that comes back to parent-child accountability. I think it's funny that we're talking about like the children when we are the children, we're the people that we're talking about. And so like, I really think that, you know, what my parents didn't do, and it's not even their fault. Like the reason why my parents didn't hold me accountable on social media is because they came from a generation where they didn't really have social media. They were on Facebook. They never were on Instagram. They weren't on Snapchat. They are now because my little sisters got them on it. That's the only reason. But when I was growing up, they didn't have that stuff. So how would they even know what I was doing? And so as I start to grow older, get into not the children of today, but into the adults of tomorrow, I know that's something I want to do for my own children is like have those accountability things. I think it starts up with that. If you can't rely on your parents to keep you accountable, you can't rely on many other people. And so I think that's something that's really big. I think schools can play a role. I think church should play a role, but really that's not going to be the same as if your parents are right there doing it for you. I also think, you know, not that everyone needs to delete their social media, but just try to delete it for one day. And if you can't do that, then you're probably addicted to it. And if you won't even listen to me for trying to do it for 24 hours, you're probably addicted to it. So I think that's just something is like we have this thing where people are addicted and they don't realize it. And so the last thing they want to do is get someone who's going to tell them, don't do it this way, don't do it this much. And so, you know, I think that's part of the issue of why we don't have as much accountability is because part of social media is it's such an independent thing in the first place.
I definitely agree with the accountability aspect. I've always had social media and I've always had a form of technology, but there's always been restrictions on it. And like Abby had mentioned earlier, I was too the kid that had to plug their phone in the kitchen at night because I would be on TikTok or Vine or whatever it was at that time. Throughout my teenage years, I would be up on it all night, and I had either school the next day or I had football in the morning. And so that was another aspect, is having that accountability and being able to tackle the next day because social media absorbs your life.
Yeah.
Hey, before you say something, Sarah, I always say respond to Abby when she talks about parents, you know, not teaching children stuff. I think if we use that analogy of the driver's ed of us, you know, not giving the keys to the car until we taught somebody, think about the first parents when cars came out. They didn't know how to do it themselves, much less able to teach their children how to drive. So I'm not by any means justifying parents' admonition of their duties of teaching. But what I am saying is that we're learning at the same rate. In some ways, my generation, Generation X, and the older millennials are a little bit behind the Z's, you know, the younger millennials and Generation Z. We're a little bit behind because you're grasping it quicker and we're trying to catch up. And you know, a lot of the parents and adults and stuff, they're getting their ideas of how to teach this, not from their experience, but from what they've read or a seminar they've gone to, or you know, something that has been taught to them, where your parents taught you how to drive based on their what?
Their own experience.
Their own experience. Mm-hmm. We don't have it. You guys got more. So it's a big learning curve. What I am excited about, and what the last guest that I had said, is that he is looking forward to the next generation, his children. He's 30 years old, his children, because his children, Generation Alpha, which are like 10-year-olds and under, they're going to be the first generation whose parents understand this more and understand the ins and outs of it. Because we're talking about millennials, maybe even some, you know, upper Z's. Let's see if they're 10. Yeah, upper Z's, somewhere around it, you know. Yeah, they could have those children in there too. So that's going to be a totally different thing. Of course, then we're going to have a whole new world, because then we're going to be in the virtual world, which is a whole other podcast. So, Sarah, you want to say something on this?
Yeah, I did. Just for, you know, people, not everyone has parents who genuinely care about, I mean, that's awful to say, but not everyone has parents who genuinely care about what their kids are doing. And so I would definitely say another huge aspect, in addition to how we're teaching, whether that's as a teacher, a member of the church, a parent. I think a lot of it at the end of the day, you have to care enough and respect yourself enough to have accountability for yourself and draw out lines for yourself personally. Be like, I'm not going to cross this line. This is too much for me, or this is this boundary for me. Because at the end of the day, if you don't care enough about yourself and respect yourself enough, it doesn't matter what anyone else is teaching you. You're not going to listen to it anyways. So that was my kind of input. Is I think accountability goes further than just how you're learning and how people are teaching you. It takes personal accountability as well. And so for people whose parents don't necessarily care, they don't have someone to teach them. Maybe their parents are a lot older and they aren't on social media at all, or they don't even know it exists if they're at that age, and they haven't lived the past 10 years. But like, like they just have been in their house all 10 years. But like, I think at the end of the day, it does come down to a certain level of personal responsibility of saying, hey, this is where I draw the line.
Especially for that upper level of Z's. And James, real quick, I taught an ethics class for the last year. And the first assignment I had all the students do was all online. So we kind of lived in this virtual space. The kids never met each other, but they had to write a personal code of ethics. They had to talk about where their code of ethics came from, what lines they wouldn't cross, and they had to dictate it. And it had to be dictated very clearly, like, I believe X because of Y. And I would write them that sentence and let them fill in the blank and explain. And they had to do it again at the end of the class. And then after that, when they redid it at the end of the class, after I taught my class on ethics, they had to reflect on what they learned and why ethics are important. And so many of them said that they had never sat down and said, these are my lines. This is what I believe. And they never had, so I can infer that they've never had that sense of self-responsibility and self-accountability because they've never sat down and written it out. And we talk about in ZUIC in the self-image curriculum, talking about, okay, what I consume, I will become when it comes to podcasts, when it comes to information, when it comes to like, what am I doing to make myself the best version of myself? Well, if you're just aimlessly scrolling and you are not holding yourself accountable and you haven't talked about like and define what are your ethics and what are your values and where do you get those, you really are just going to become lost in the sauce, and you're going to just become whatever the world lets you become, and you lose all sense of accountability.
All right, tied into a bow as we start to close out, I want to put you all on the spot and a very brief, very succinct parting piece of advice that you're going to give to the hundreds of thousands of people who will view and listen to this all over the world about social media. Who wants to start with their one piece of succinct, brief advice?
I can start. I said earlier, but try 24 hours. If you're not willing to do that, you just share love on social media. Love is patient. It's kind. It rejoices in the good bearings. It does not rejoice in the wrongdoing. So just remember that if you're gonna share, if you're gonna be on social media, share love.
Hard to follow.
Retweet. I'm kidding.
That's pretty hard to follow, but yes, retweet. I would say because there's not a lot of transparency out there. They, as in whoever sees anything, they don't know you. You really don't know them. And there's not much you can do about that over a screen, and it's okay.
Yeah. I was going to say something very similar. There is so much life outside of this little box that costs way more money than it should. There's so much more life outside of it. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't really quite matter what filters you use or don't use, what your page looks like. If you aren't being real on social media, if you're following accounts that make you think poorly of yourself and of others, maybe try Lafe's idea, delete it. Figure out what your intentionality is behind things, because there's so much more life outside of it.
I would have to say that my piece of advice is to be intentional with your influence on social media and everything that you do.
And to wrap a pretty little bow on all of that, social media is fun, and it can help us stay connected. And I am not going to lie, I love being on social media and working on social media, but I also, like Sarah Beth said, make sure you're living life outside of the little box. Make sure you understand who you are as a human, and then portray that accurately and authentically on social media.
Thank you guys for being willing to join us on this roundtable today. I think this has really been a good conclusion to our series. I really love this. Listen, audience, thank you for being with us as well and staying with us at the end. Someone you know needs to hear this episode. Hey, this may be the episode that you can show in your classroom, can show in your small group at church, can show in some area, or send it over to friends to listen to, through your Apple Podcasts or something, or iHeart, whatever the app that you use, and can generate some discussions and some insight into how you guys can effectively navigate this world of social media. But someone you know needs to listen to this. So please like, share, and comment on this episode, and we'll see you again soon on the Gen Z Show. Bye, guys.